What if what you called rejection was actually the greatest protection of your life? What if that painful silence, that sudden distance, wasn't the end, but the beginning of something much bigger? The story you're about to hear might forever change the way you see loneliness, silence, and emptiness. Because sometimes it's when everything goes quiet that God starts speaking the loudest. He was a young wolf, strong, sharp, full of promise. From an early age, he learned to run with the fastest and hide with the cleverest. He was always searching for a place in the heart of the pack, a space where the elders' respect was a sign of value, where every step beside the leaders felt like a victory. He stood out, not out of arrogance but effort. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to belong. He wasn't the most dominant or the most feared, but there was something different in his eyes, a quiet yearning to fit in. Always the first to hunt, the last to sleep. And still, it never seemed enough. Some admired him in silence. Others watched with suspicion. Until one day, without knowing how or why, everything flipped. Failure. Or maybe a setup. A mistake that wasn't his. A misread trail, an unfair accusation. And suddenly, the young wolf stood before the pack, surrounded by hard stares, closed ears, and even harder hearts. No one wanted to hear his side. No one looked for the truth. The verdict was cold, blunt, and final. He was banished, expelled, rejected by those he most wanted to honor. That night, the sky felt darker, the forest thicker. He didn't know where to go or how to start over. His trembling paws pressed into the wet earth. His heavy breathing wasn't from exhaustion, it was disbelief. How could something he didn't do cost him everything? The trees' shadows seemed to whisper lies, echoing the rejection he carried inside. You're not worthy. You failed. You're alone. And the loneliness was real. The cold bit harder than the wind. It was soul deep. The emptiness of not belonging anywhere. He curled up beside a stone, listening to the forest sounds like invisible monsters. For the first time, he didn't want to fight. He just wanted to understand. And there, in the middle of the pain, a whisper came. What if this isn't punishment? What if it's protection? Sometimes what feels like punishment is just God pulling you away from what would have held you back. The forest felt too vast, the night too long. But in that silence, something strange happened. In the emptiness he felt, for the first time, a strength that didn't come from the pack or others' approval, came from within. Because it was in the emptiness that he found something he'd never discover surrounded by noise. A kind of peace that didn't rely on applause. A kind of presence that only shows up when everything else fades. And that first night away from the pack, something happened. Something he would never forget. Waiting on your okay to continue with the next part. The forest felt endless. Every step the wolf took seemed to lead him deeper into a maze of leaves, shadows, and silence. The night crept on slowly, thick and cold, and the hunger began to gnaw, not just at his stomach, but at his soul. He sniffed the ground, scanned his surroundings, but there was no prey, no company, no path, just dark trees and even darker thoughts. The wind whispered through the branches, and sometimes the rustling leaves sounded like distant laughter, as if mocking his fall. And that's when the real desert began. Not the kind with sand and heat, but the emotional kind. The kind where your own mind turns against you and your heart starts to believe the lies it's heard. What if I really am what they said I am? The question echoed like a howl in the emptiness. What if I'm weak? What if I deserve to be alone? With no one around, the inner voices grew louder. Memories turned into judges, and the mistakes, real or not, became chains. The pack's rejection started to hurt in a new way. Not just as a loss, but as identity. Like being cast out had rewritten who he was. But in between one thought and the next, something began to shift. Slowly, he noticed a subtle but powerful difference. He was alone. But he wasn't lost. Because being lost means having no direction. And even though he didn't know where he was going, he kept walking. He was still breathing, still trying. And that meant something inside him was still alive. The trees seemed to watch in silence. The moon, high above, cast its reflection on a hidden lake, like it was offering the wolf a mirror. And there, seeing his distorted image in the water, he remembered. He remembered being a pup, unscarred, unafraid. He remembered his first howl, his first run in the open field, the feeling of freedom. That memory wasn't a punishment. It was a calling, a reminder that he was still that same wolf, just more wounded now, more alone, but not any less capable. Then he stumbled upon a different space. Clearing. No trees blocking the sky, no sounds breaking the stillness. Just him, and his own breath. And in that exact place, something deep happened. It was like the whole world paused. The sound of his breath echoed in his chest, and his soul went quiet. And in that silence he understood. God doesn't pull you away to punish you. He separates you to reveal something to you. Because some truths can only be heard when the noise stops. Some revelations only come in the quiet. And in that clearing, with no audience, no commands, no one to judge or applaud, he began to hear something new, a different kind of calling, a gentle presence. And that's when he realized, being set apart wasn't abandonment. It was preparation. The clearing wasn't the end of the road. It was the place where everything could begin again, if he chose to listen. And in the very second he thought about giving up, a sound came from the forest. But it wasn't a threat. It was an answer. Waiting on your okay to continue with the next part. Days started passing without the wolf even noticing. What once felt like despair turned into routine. And the routine, as tough as it was, started teaching him. Alone, he learned to hear what he used to ignore. To notice the subtle rustle of leaves, the flutter of prey, the scent of change in the wind. The forest, once terrifying, became his teacher. And he, with no one to follow, became his own guide. The hunger didn't hurt as much anymore. His body, now leaner, was also faster. His senses sharpened. His gaze steadier. Every scar was a reminder. He'd been through something. And he'd survived. His wounds didn't define him, but they told his story. He now understood that every loss held a lesson. And every absence made room for growth. One day, during one of his wanderings, he found a cliff. It was high, offering a view of the horizon in every direction. And there, for the first time since the exile, he howled. Not as someone crying for help, but as someone declaring, "I'm still here." The sound echoed through the mountains, stretching across the sky like a wordless prayer. A song of affirmation, a reminder to the universe. He hadn't given up. Up above, an eagle hovered, silent, sovereign, watching. It didn't come closer, but it didn't disappear either. And every night as he howled, it flew overhead, like it was responding with its presence. As if to say, some flights only begin when you stop trying to walk with those who were never meant to lift you. It was true. For a long time, he tried to fit into a group that never fully saw him. Fought for a place where his true self was always being trimmed down. And now, in his solitude, something new began to bloom. A freedom he'd never known. It wasn't easy, but it was real. That's when a new understanding was born. He hadn't been left behind. He'd been set aside. And that changed everything. Because there's a big difference between being abandoned and being separated for something greater. That revelation didn't erase the pain of rejection, but it gave it meaning. He stopped fighting what had happened, and started embracing the process. The transformation was slow but deep. There were no answers, but there was peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having it all figured out, but the kind that comes from no longer battling what you can't control. And so, between howls and silences, between gray days and starry nights, he kept growing. Inside and out. And without even realizing it, he was becoming someone he never would have become if he'd stayed with the pack. What he didn't know was that other eyes were watching. And one gray afternoon, when the wind shifted, he saw something moving through the trees. Something that would change everything. Waiting on your okay to continue with the next part. The figure moved slowly through the trees, limping, head low, body visibly wounded. It was a she-wolf, young but scarred. Her fur was dirty, a fresh wound on her side, and in her eyes, the same look he once carried, the look of someone left behind, of someone who'd lost more than just strength, someone who'd lost meaning. Instinctively, the wolf stood alert. But what he felt wasn't danger. It was empathy. For the first time in a long time, his first thought wasn't to protect himself. It was her. He approached gently, watching her movements without imposing. She hesitated, of course. Pain and fear do that. But over time she let her guard down. She laid down slowly, trusting in his silence. In the days that followed, he took care of her, hunted and brought food, laid close to keep her warm, cleaned her wounds as best he could. And most importantly, he didn't ask questions. He just stayed. That silent presence was everything she needed to start healing. And without even noticing, he was healing too. Because in caring for someone else, he found a new purpose. It wasn't about being accepted. It was about being a refuge. They formed a bond that didn't need words. No competition, no need to prove anything. Just cooperation. They shared looks, howls, and the same rhythm. They lived in sync, with mutual respect and care. It was new, but it felt right. The clearing where he had once cried, where he had felt exiled, now felt different. Same ground, same trees, but a new meaning. The place that once seemed like punishment was now home. Because home, he realized, isn't where you arrive. It's where you can serve. And so, others came. From time to time, another lost wolf would appear from the shadows. Weak, tired, broken. And the young wolf, now no longer quite so young, welcomed them, helped them, guided them. Not as a leader, but as someone who knew the way. Because he had walked it. He didn't need a crowd anymore. He wasn't chasing loud approval. He just wanted to be where his heart could be useful. And there he was. The forest he once feared had become fertile ground for his new beginning. A place where the voices of rejection had gone quiet. Where silence became a bridge. And where emptiness became a mission. And one starry night under the open sky, he howled once again, but this time with a new sound. The sound of someone who finally understood. Waiting on your okay to continue with the final part. Time passed, but the wolf's gaze was different now. He walked the forest with steady steps. Not like someone searching for a place, but like someone who had already found it. The one who once wandered in doubt now carried certainty in his eyes. He was no longer the rejected one, no longer the lost one. He was someone new, shaped by pain, refined by solitude, transformed by the journey. He never saw his old pack again. No trails, no scents, no familiar sounds. And, surprisingly, that didn't matter anymore. Because the heart that once begged to be noticed now beat for something bigger. To serve, to shelter, to walk with purpose. Their absence wasn't a wound anymore. It was a healed scar, freed space. One golden sunset among the calm trees. The wolf heard a soft sound. A faint whimper, fragile and trembling. He carefully followed it and found a pup. Alone, scared, shaking with fear just like he once had. The scene froze him for a moment. It was like looking at his past self. And without hesitation he stepped closer, lay down beside the pup, offered warmth, protection, presence. He didn't have to say a word. The simple act of staying said everything. In that moment something inside him aligned. He realized he had become exactly what he once longed for after being cast out. A leader with compassion. A guide who doesn't demand. A refuge that doesn't judge. Someone who just understands because he's lived it. Not every loss is the end. Sometimes it's just God removing what couldn't see you. To prepare you to be seen by those who truly matter. Because some connections only happen when you stop chasing applause and start walking in purpose. You might be feeling like that wolf too. Forgotten. Rejected. Alone. Like no one hears your cry, like the world left you in the dark. But what if this place that feels like a desert is actually where something new is about to grow? The forest that scares you today. might be the field where your purpose will bloom. Don't give up. Don't go back. Learn to hear your own voice. Because sometimes what you thought was loneliness was just God making space. And then, on a clear morning, he climbed to the top of the mountain. The wind brushed through his fur. The sun warmed the stones. He looked out at the horizon, not with longing, but with purpose, because the past had done its job. And the future finally had direction. The screen fades to black with the words, "Being set apart wasn't abandonment. It was preparation." If this story spoke to you, drop in the comments what touched your heart the most. And if you want to keep hearing messages like this, subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more stories of hope to walk through together.